Well, Secretary Kerry, great to be here with you. Great to have you back at the TIME100 Summit. You spent the last 3 years working to bring the US back into the global climate conversation as special presidential envoy for climate. And I was lucky enough to see you firsthand pushing leaders in business and government leaders to do more. Obviously, there are a lot of factors at play over the course of the last 3 years, but from your vantage point, is the world in a better place now than when you started that job 3 years ago in terms of climate?
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for the invitation to be here. The answer is, I think, profoundly yes, absolutely. A lot of people might not believe that at first blush. But in 2020, when I was asked to do the job, in 2021, when I was sworn in, we were heading to 3.5 to 4 degrees, more likely 4 degrees of warming on the planet. And we had no defined options for how you were going to get out of that. Now we do. I mean, we came from a Trump administration that pulled out of the Paris Agreement, zero funded climate activities for 4 years, stole America's credibility from ourselves, in essence, and really put us on a very bleak pathway. Under President Biden, and he's been more seized by this issue than perhaps the public discussion has given awareness of because of Ukraine and Gaza, Israel, and so forth. But believe me, as much as we all hate the violence of what is happening in the Middle East and really feel powerfully about Russia's invasion, illegal invasion of Ukraine, this issue is taking far more lives on a daily basis than anything else in the world. 7 million people a year are dying now from bad air quality. And where's that come from? It comes from something we used to call pollution. Greenhouse gases are pollution, and that pollution is killing people. And it's destroying habitat, it's destroying, farmers' opportunity to grow certain crops, it's destroying forests, and having a profound impact over one simple reality. Human beings will not make the necessary decisions to move rapidly to do one of the only two things we can do to win this battle. Because this battle is a battle against emissions, against greenhouse gas emissions, against methane, against CO2, nitrous oxide, all of which are man-made because of the way we choose to heat our homes, light our buildings, and travel, and so forth. It's the burning of fossil fuel that is at fault. And we're at fault for the ones that make the decisions to do it. So we have two choices. You either capture all of those emissions and do something constructive with them, or you don't make them in the first place. And a whole bunch of folks, myself included, have serious doubts about bringing to scale the level of capture necessary to win the battle of what the science says we must do. 43% minimum reduction of emissions between now and 2030, and a 50% net zero reduction by 2050 in order to keep 1.5 degrees of warming as the limit. So that's the challenge we face. And we're now in a position, according to the International Energy Agency, if all the things we put on the table in Glasgow, and all of the things at the COP, and all the things we put on the table in Sharm el-Sheikh, and now in Dubai, if we did them, we could hold the Earth's temperature to 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. I mean, that is near victory of the nth degree. We're not doing everything we promised we would do. And, I and others, I think, are getting pretty increasingly militant and frustrated and angry about the avoidance of responsibility by people in public office. I must say, I'm not here to be partisan, but there wasn't one Republican vote for the IRA.
Yeah.
And yet the IRA has made the greatest difference in our efforts to move than anything we've done.
I want to just highlight the numbers you said, 3.5 to 1.7. That's a remarkable change. And I have to say, it's rare that you have someone who spent a career in public elected life, and you didn't actually brag about many of the accomplishments that you did have, and hopefully we'll touch on some of those in a minute.
Well, let's get at them.
Yeah, let's get at them. I want to talk a little bit about a big focus of yours, which has been this finance question. And the numbers, when you think about climate finance, are really astounding. There's this Deloitte figure that shows $5 to $7 trillion annually to really get to this net zero that we need to. And that number, you'll see that from the IEA and others. And just to be clear, that's trillion with a T. That's trillion with a T every year. That was a focus of yours. Getting that money to flow was a focus of yours as President Biden's climate envoy. It's also a focus of yours in your next phase in the private sector. So could you tell me a little bit about how you intend to do that and why choose at this moment to make the transition to the private sector as the means to make that money flow?
Well, let me begin with the latter part of the question because it sort of leads into the answer, I think, more effectively, which is why did I choose now? Because in Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh, and now in Dubai, we have put in place a global consensus about what we need to do. And in fact, in Dubai, I don't think most people are aware of this, but we had an incredible outcome, which really represented the sort of pinnacle of everything we've been pushing for the last 3 years.
And folks, just for people who haven't followed Dubai, this is the big United Nations climate conference that happened last December.
200 nations come together in what is without doubt the most complicated diplomacy that there is, because when you're trying to build consensus in a global forum, everybody has to agree. If one nation wants to walk out and say, we don't agree, this is a farce, we're on the other, your guys are, what, we're in trouble, you don't get it. We got all the nations there, about 195 nations agreed on the following. We must transition away from fossil fuel. This is the exact language. In a fair, orderly, equitable manner, so as to achieve net zero by 2050, which requires a plan, according to the science, accelerating in this decade, which is the key. If we don't accelerate in this decade, we don't get there. And that's what we worked with China. We got China to agree we're going to accelerate in this decade. And finally, in accordance with the science. What does that mean? That means no longer a debate about 2 degrees or well below 2. It means 1.5 degrees, folks. That's the state of the science since 2018. So that's a very powerful paragraph. And I just said after we finished this, hey, we got great words on a piece of paper, but are people going to really do it? And so implementing it, to me, is the great challenge now, and that's what I intend to do. I'm going to be working to deploy the trillions as effectively as possible so we can win the battle. We will not win it. I mean, I'm not being dire or anything. I'm just talking facts here. Every decision we have made with President Biden on the subject of the climate crisis is based not on ideology, not on politics, not on the election. It's based on science. It's based on physics and mathematics and some chemistry and biology, but mostly physics and mathematics, which tells you, hey, here's what you're doing, folks. You burn the fossil, you put the emissions up in the atmosphere, it gets thicker, heat can't escape. 90% of the heat of the planet is going into the ocean. 50% of the heat of the planet is coming from methane, the most destructive of all gases. So we know what's happening to us. The issue is, do we have the courage and conviction and readiness for future generations and for the benefit of everybody today to do the things we know we need to do? And that's the transition. And I am genuinely super excited by the R&D and development and the amount of investment. We have about 1.8 trillion now in the market investing. We need to get up to the 2.5 to 4.5, 5 trillion, as has been stated. But companies have that. There are plenty of entities in the world that have big money. And a lot of them, you just had Eric Schmidt out here. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he maybe talked about the challenge to AI and other things, because these data centers are going to need a massive amount of energy to run supercomputing, quantum computing. So we want to do that, but we're going to have to produce that energy. Where's it going to come from? We're not deploying renewables fast enough to be able to do that. And renewables aren't obviously going to be as powerful as perhaps a small modular nuclear reactor or fusion if it comes online or whatever. But I'm excited by the incredible effort of a number of folks in the world who are putting money into these new technologies. And one of them is going to win, folks. One of them is going to break through. I can't tell you which one today, though fusion looks more promising than it has ever. And hydrogen, if we can get the cost down, the hydrogen electrolyzers are now 4 or 5 times more effective than they were a couple of years ago. Solar is down 87% in price. Wind is down 50%. Lithium is down 97%. So a lot of things are moving in the right direction. And if we can bring all of that to scale, which is what I want to work at, by deploying funds both in the developing world, the emerging economies, and in the half of the 20 countries that are responsible for 80% of all the emissions. And you know who they are. I mean, China's producing 30% of all the emissions.
I think if I can just, I think what you're saying is so important, talking about all the technologies out there, then how do we bring the money along to make that happen? And you're working on that in your next stage, and I think it's something for people to be mindful of as they think about their own areas where they can influence things. How can they help make finance flow? We only have 90 seconds left. Crazy, right? But I want to just ask you touched on the campaign and the Biden administration, and then how it doesn't necessarily get through to people that the administration has done a lot on climate. You really focused on climate when you ran for president. It's not really come up as much this year. Should it? And then very briefly, what are the stakes for climate in this election?
I mean, the stakes are like, whether you wake up in the morning and it's daylight or you can survive. I mean, this is really, really critical. But that said, it matters who is president, obviously. But when Trump was president, 75% of the new electricity that came online in America while he was president came from renewables. Now, probably he didn't know it, or he would have tried to stop it. But
I think he did try to stop it.
Right, yeah. But the fact is that even when he was president, I believe this, and I think this is a very important takeaway for all of you. This energy transition is going to happen. Absolutely going to happen. The only issue is, will it happen fast enough that we avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis? Rich nations will muddle through. It's the poorest people of the planet who are going to be decimated. When the heat is 140, 150 degrees in Africa, when the implosion of the food production capacity is, in fact, when water is scarce and hard to find. And then you have millions of climate refugees banging on the door of Europe and of the global north saying, let us in. And what are we going to do? We all know what happened with the Turkish release of Syrian refugees who found their way to Europe, and we know how that affected the politics of Europe. We're seeing that play out right now. We know how it affected our own politics. So mind you, we're heading in a very dangerous direction, but we can win this battle, folks. This is not, as I said earlier, rocket science. We know what we have to do. With the technology we have today, if we just deployed it, we could meet the 43% goal, buy time to be able to develop some of these other technologies, and no one is being asked, maybe to some people's chagrin they're not, but the reality is you don't have to ask people to sacrifice life quality or style at all. The truth is, the other side of this transition provides an absolute, provable, clear, 100% reality of a better life, of clean air, clean, plastics in the ocean, other things that contribute to the problems today of microplastics. The amount we're all imbibing is absolutely shocking. These are things we need to deal with, but we could deal with it and have a safer, cleaner, healthier, more productive economy and life at the back end of this. And what we've got to do is demand this from people in public life. And no one has to, I see people say, well, you're flying in an airplane. Nobody has said you can't fly. But let's fly on SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. Let's fly intelligently. We have electric planes that are now being designed and coming online. So this is a matter of time. If we do the things we know how to do, we don't have to give up quality of life. We can have an improved quality of life. And we can produce a planet that truly is moving towards sustainability. Not one country in the world is living sustainably today. And you cannot continue at the pace we are today with illegal logging, illegal fishing, thousands of illegal fishing vessels on the high seas, just strip mining the ocean. We have massive number of, one country is responsible for 60% of the illegal logging coming into that country. Come on, guys. You know why young people are despairing today and pissed off at the rest of us? Because adults aren't behaving like adults and making adult decisions. And if we could just do that, we can win this battle.
I think that's a great note to end on. Adult decisions on climate. Thank you, Secretary Kerry.
All right.